She looked so beautiful in white. Lashes curled, smile perfect. Her hand clutched the bouquet like it had never trembled. But I had the photo. Her in my bed, with my husband. Same sheets, same date. The night I was in the ER, bleeding out the child I'll never hold. Now she was about to walk down the aisle, and I had a choice. Where are you listening from? Drop your city in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more true stories like mine. My name is Avery Monroe. I'm 35 years old. And for most of my life, I thought I was the anchor that kept our family from drifting apart. I was wrong. Scarlett is my little sister, 4 years younger, louder, prettier, better at smiling for cameras and getting away with murder metaphorically, until recently. People used to call us inseparable. They'd say we were the Monroe girls like a brand. She was the spark, I was the spine. When our parents died in a car crash, I was 22. Scarlett was still in high school. She moved into my dorm apartment. I worked nights, paid her tuition, cooked her meals, and told her she'd never have to feel alone again. I meant it, back then. She's always had this magnetism. People just melt around her. Teachers, strangers, men, even women who should have known better, including me. Caleb came into my life 6 years ago. He was steady, gentle, a pharmacist who quoted poetry when he thought I was asleep. Our relationship wasn't fireworks. It was scaffolding. It was someone remembering to put gas in my car and checking my tires before a storm. I needed that. And Scarlett, she loved him, or so she said. She used to joke, if I ever find someone like Caleb, I'll lock him down in a second. I used to laugh, because it never occurred to me she might not wait to find her own. The first time something felt off was 6 months ago at a Sunday brunch. Scarlett had just come back from a trip to Savannah. She looked tan, relaxed, overdressed for waffles. She hugged Caleb a little too long, said, "You still smell like cedar and cardamom, just like college." Caleb laughed, said, "It's just my shaving cream." But he didn't meet my eyes. It was nothing. A flicker, a second too long. I filed it away. Later that day, I found a pair of gold earrings tucked into our sofa cushions. Not mine. Not Scarlett's usual taste either. More vintage. Delicate. I asked her, "Did you lose these?" She blinked. "Oh yeah, I think they fell out of my purse. Too fast, like she'd rehearsed it." I nodded and said nothing, because back then I still believed blood meant something. I still believed my sister would never sleep in the bed I built with my own hands. I was wrong. And now, she's getting married in 24 hours. To a man who doesn't know what she did, who she was, what she broke, and I'm supposed to smile in her wedding photos. But I don't take pictures with ghosts. Not anymore. 3 weeks before Scarlett's wedding, she came over unannounced. Again, she did that a lot lately. Just showed up. No call, no text. Just the sound of her key. Yes, her key twisting in our front door like it belonged to her. I brought tiramisu, she sang, balancing a foil-covered tray in one hand, designer tote swinging from the other. Her nails were fresh, soft blush with gold tips. Caleb was in the kitchen, making pasta, his favorite Sunday ritual. Scar, he smiled, wiping his hands on a dish towel. "You always know when to show up." I paused, the way he said it like a habit, like they shared a schedule I wasn't part of. She laughed. "Maybe I've got a psychic bond with your fettuccine." I watched her set the dessert on the counter, then walk over and fix the collar on Caleb's shirt. Not dramatically, not flirtatiously, just intimately. His hands dropped to his sides. He didn't move. She smoothed the fabric slowly, fingers brushing against his neck, then leaned in and whispered something. He chuckled. I couldn't hear the words, but I heard the silence after. I stood there holding a bundle of time, and not one of them turned to include me in the moment. "You two seem cozy," I said. They both looked up. Scarlett blinked. "Oh, please, sis, don't be weird." Then she rolled her eyes like I was the dramatic one. Caleb walked over, kissed my cheek. "You okay?" he asked too lightly. I smiled, nodded, and excused myself to the bathroom. Behind the locked door, I stared at myself in the mirror. Mascara, pale lips, tired eyes. I used to think I was beautiful. Now I felt like wallpaper. That night I lay in bed while Caleb scrolled on his phone beside me. His screen reflected off his glasses, messages, images, something fast. "Who are you texting?" I asked. He replied without looking up, "Just Blake. He's asking about the wine for the wedding." "Scarlett's fiancé?" I nodded, but something in my chest pulled tight. Blake didn't drink. I knew that, so did Caleb, but I didn't press, not yet, because deep down I didn't want answers. Not if they shattered everything, but maybe I should have. "Would you say something if you saw your sister touching your husband that way?" The next Saturday, I came home early from a client session. Caleb was in the living room, shirt untucked, hair damp, watching a documentary. he usually only put on when he needed background noise. I kissed his forehead. He smelled like mint and cedar. Scarlett's favorite combination. "Everything okay?" I asked. He nodded, muted the TV, said you'd be home at 6. I finished early, I smiled. "Where's Scarlett? I saw her car out front." He blinked. "Oh, she just dropped off some florals. Didn't stay long." My stomach fluttered, not from jealousy, but from the familiar taste of something off. She hadn't mentioned stopping by, and Scarlett never did anything without announcing it on group chat Instagram, or with a "guess what I just did" selfie. But I let it go again. An hour later, as I reached behind the sofa to plug in my charger, I found something wedged between the cushions. A lipstick, gold casing, branded with the initials SB, Scarlett's personal line. I picked it up. It wasn't open, but the cap had smudges. And next to it, tucked almost out of view, was a hairpin. The kind Scarlett wore when she styled her effortless curls. The kind Caleb once complimented as vintage, like you stepped out of a noir film. I stared at the 2 items in my hand. 2 pieces of nothing unless you knew how close they had to be to end up there. I walked to the kitchen, held up the lipstick. "Scarlett, forget something." Caleb looked. His pause was barely a beat. "Oh yeah, she was trying on lip shades for the rehearsal dinner. Must have dropped it." "Thought she didn't stay long," I said. "She didn't, 5 minutes tops." He didn't meet my eyes, and I didn't push, because when you start digging, you better be ready for what turns up. That night, Scarlett texted, "Can you bring my SB Gold Gloss to the tasting tomorrow?" Left it in my purse, I think. I stared at the screen. In her purse, not under my couch, so either Caleb was lying or Scarlett was. Or both. But the thing is, when 2 people lie to you in sync, you start wondering if they've been rehearsing. And worse, how long they've been practicing without you. Should I check her messages, or would that make me the villain? It happened by accident, like most things that change your life. I was trying to airdrop a mood board from my iPad to Scarlett's. We were sitting side by side at her studio, finalizing flowers for the reception. She got a call and stepped out, left her iPad unlocked. And I didn't mean to snoop, I didn't. But when I tapped the wrong folder, something popped up. Photos. Labeled Sev Trip, private date stamped 3 months ago. The weekend Caleb said he was in Savannah. The same weekend I ended up in the ER, cramping, bleeding alone, in a hospital gown while he texted. "I'm sorry, babe. Just a food bug. I'll call you as soon as I land." The first image loaded slowly. A bed. My bed. The green linen set I'd bought from Portugal, still slightly wrinkled at the edges. A man's arm. Caleb's curved behind Scarlett's back. She was smiling at the camera, lipstick half-faded, shoulder bare. The gold earrings she lost weeks ago glinting under the bedside lamp. And in the background I saw it. My book. The one I kept on the nightstand, open to the same dog-eared page I'd been reading the week before. My throat closed. This wasn't a hotel, this wasn't Savannah. This was my bedroom. The next photo was worse. Scarlett on her stomach, Caleb half asleep behind her, his hand curled over the curve of her hip, and a caption under it written by her. "Not bad for a quick nap." My fingers went numb, not from shock, but from clarity, the kind that cracks like frost under pressure. I exited the folder, forwarded 2 images to my phone, deleted the airdrop request. Scarlett walked back in. "Did it go through?" she asked, sipping a green smoothie. I smiled, nodded, and said all set. She kissed my cheek on the way out, like nothing had happened. But something had, something irreversible. And now I had the proof, chilling, undeniable, framed in my sheets and my silence. Would you confront them or wait until she's wearing white? I couldn't sleep that night, not even with the pills Caleb once prescribed for those nights when your mind won't stop moving. My mind wasn't moving, it was frozen, looping the same 2 images over and over until they blurred into noise. I got out of bed and sat on the kitchen floor, barefoot, back against the fridge. And I remembered the worst night of my life. 3 months ago, the pain started around 11 p.m. Sharp, deep, wrong. I thought it was just cramping. I tried to breathe through it. But when the bleeding wouldn't stop, I drove myself to the ER, alone. Caleb was in Savannah. Scarlett had offered to stay at my place, just in case anything feels off. At 2:14 a.m., as I lay in that sterile bed under cold fluorescent light, a message came in. "Scarlett, I'm still at your place. Just lit your lavender candle. Hope it helps when you get home." I had held onto that text like a life raft. Told myself I wasn't alone, that my sister was waiting for me. But now I know she was in my bed, with my husband, breathing in my candle while I bled out the child we all said we wanted. I didn't cry. I just stared at the fridge magnet with the grocery list Scarlett had scribbled weeks ago. Almond milk, lemon bars, shampoo. Love doesn't always die with a scream. Sometimes it slips out like a quiet exhale, after too many lies. The next morning, I packed the photos in a plain envelope, wrote 2 words on the front, for the bride. Then I placed it in my nightstand, not because I was ready, but because I needed to remember I wasn't crazy. I wasn't dramatic. I wasn't imagining things. They were real. The betrayal was real. And the woman walking down the aisle this weekend was not my sister anymore. She was a stranger wearing my lipstick and calling it love. Do you destroy her wedding or let karma do the work? The call came just after midnight. I almost didn't answer, but something in me wanted to hear her voice. Hey, Scarlett whispered like the silence was sacred. I know you've been distant, but I need you tomorrow. I didn't say anything. She kept going. I can't walk down that aisle without you there. You're my only family Ave. You always were. I stared at the ceiling, counting the cracks above the fan. Then I lied, softly, calmly. I'll be there. She exhaled like I'd handed her oxygen. Thank you. I knew you would. You're the strongest person I know. I smiled. She didn't hear the click of my printer spitting out copies of the photos. She didn't see me sliding them into a pale gray envelope, one that matched her bridesmaid clutches. She didn't know I'd spent the last hour writing a note in the same looping script I once used to forge Mom's signature on field trip forms. For when the dress no longer protects you. I sealed the envelope, slid it beneath the gift table tag with her name calligraphed in gold. Then I walked into the closet and chose a dress the color of ash. If she wanted me at her wedding, fine. I'd come, not as her sister, as her reckoning. The morning of Scarlett's wedding, the sky hung low over Asheville. Clouds sat like breath held too long, unmoving, waiting. I stood in front of the closet for almost 10 minutes, touching fabric, feeling for silence. No white, no pink, nothing cheerful or soft. I chose slate gray, structured shoulders, slight waist taper. It didn't say joy, and it didn't say grief. It said, I see everything. I tied my hair back, clear lip balm, a dusting of powder, no mascara. I wanted no risk of smudges. In my purse phone, Mint's spare charger and 1 envelope, gray matte unsealed. Inside the photos, the truth, and a single line written in black pen. For when the dress no longer protects you. I arrived at the venue before noon. The glass chapel sat deep in the forest, nestled between birch trees and curated wildflowers. It looked exactly like her Pinterest board, almost too perfect. Scarlett always said she wanted to feel like a woodland queen. I wondered if queens ever had to face the crowd once the illusion cracked. No one noticed me, which suited me just fine. Inside, the florists were arguing about rose placement. The photographer was adjusting light. Someone from catering handed me a flute of cucumber water before realizing I wasn't part of the planning team. I made my way to the bridal suite. Scarlett's clutch lay on the dressing table, monogrammed SJ, surrounded by lipsticks and lavender sachets. I didn't pause. I slid the envelope under her compact mirror. It blended with the shadows, elegant, quiet, measured. Then I left the room before the makeup artist returned. The hallway was lined with photos of Scarlett and Blake laughing at vineyards, cuddling puppies, standing in front of white curtains and rented backdrops. All fantasy, all fog. Downstairs, the guests had started to arrive. Strings of gold ribbon danced between rows of seats. And then I saw him, Caleb, standing alone near the second row, adjusting his cuffs like nerves might come off in the crease. Our eyes met. He walked over, slow, cautious. Didn't think you'd come, he said. I smiled just enough. Why wouldn't I? It's family. He looked at me longer than necessary, like he was waiting for a crack to open in my face, like he expected rage or at least grief. But I gave him nothing, just a steady breath, and a silence he couldn't decode. He searched for cracks. I gave him none. The ceremony began at exactly 3:07. Scarlett was never one to be fashionably late. She liked the world to wait for her, but only just enough. Guests whispered as she entered. Her gown was ivory lace, long-sleeved, fitted like skin. Her veil floated behind her like a second ghost. The quartet played something slow and cinematic. The aisle glimmered under skylight. Even the birds outside the chapel seemed to hold their breath. I sat on the end of the third row, close enough to see her face, far enough to stay untouched. She held a bouquet of white ranunculus, her favorite. She once told me they looked like lies pretending to be roses. Blake stood at the altar, posture perfect, smile soft. He looked like the promise she always wanted. But it wasn't Blake she glanced at when she reached the front. It was Caleb. For half a second, quick as a blink, their eyes met. And in that glance I saw it. Recognition, familiarity, a code they thought only they understood. But I understood it too. Now, the vows were brief. Scarlett's voice shook just enough to sound sincere. Blake kissed her like he meant forever. The guests cheered. The quartet picked up tempo. The air seemed to lift. At the reception tables glittered with gold cutlery and crystal flutes. Every napkin folded into a rose. Every plate arranged like a painting. The speeches began. Her best friend, maid of honor, told stories of middle school secrets. Their new mother-in-law toasted to loyalty, patience, and grace. Scarlett dabbed the corner of her eye with a linen square. Then someone tapped my arm. "You're next," they whispered. I didn't flinch. I walked up slowly, took the mic. Scarlett smiled at me, tense, hopeful, testing. I didn't smile back. "Scarlett," I said, "has always been a woman who gets what she wants." Soft laughter. When we were kids, she used to steal the last cookie, then convince me I'd eaten it myself. More laughter, louder this time. She was magic. Still is. But magic, as we know, comes with consequences. The room hushed. Even the silverware stilled. She once told me that love is just attention worn, long enough to look like devotion. I didn't believe her then. I turned. Blake sat still, glass half raised. I walked over, set the monogrammed clutch gently in front of him. "She left this backstage," I said, then stepped off the platform. I didn't look at Scarlett, didn't need to. The countdown had already started. I had just reached the edge of the room when I heard the clasp snap open. Soft like a secret coming undone, Blake leaned forward. Curious, calm. The way people do when they still think the worst belongs to someone else. He pulled the envelope from the clutch, unfolded it, and stopped breathing. Photo 1, Scarlett in my bed. Sheets twisted, smile smug. The gold earrings she lost flashing near her collarbone. Photo 2, Caleb's hand on her hip, his wedding band still visible. Photo 3, captioned in Scarlett's handwriting. "Not bad for a quick nap." Blake stared at the images like they were weapons. And they were. His face drained not just of color, but of narrative. The story he thought he was in, gone. Someone near the projector gasped. They'd opened the USB drive. Synced to the AV screen. Scarlett must have used the same file earlier for the wedding slideshow. But this wasn't baby pictures or first date photos. This was betrayal, raw and time-stamped. The images filled the wall behind the head table, 12 feet tall, undeniable. Gasps cracked through the room like gunfire. Chairs scraped back. Forks clattered. A glass fell shattered. Scarlett turned, saw it, and buckled. Her knees hit the floor with a soft thud. Her bouquet scattered like bones. Blake stood. He didn't yell, didn't accuse. He simply turned to her, voice steady. "Is this why you cried during your vows?" Scarlett opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Caleb moved as if to step forward, then thought better. He looked at me, just for a moment. I held his gaze, unflinching. There was nothing left to say. No one called my name. No one stopped me. I walked out the front doors, down the gravel path, into the cold spring air. The sound behind me faded, wedding music, gasps, chaos. I pulled a cigarette from my coat, lit it, didn't smoke, just held it. Let the wind bite at my skin. Let the silence press back into me. She wanted me there. I came, and left as her storm. Blake didn't yell. He didn't demand explanations or call for someone to turn off the screen. He simply stepped down from the dais slow, like his body had just remembered gravity. Scarlett was still on the floor, veil twisted around her wrist, trying to rise, but caught in her own dress. He walked past her, stopped 2 feet away, held up his left hand and slid the ring from his finger. She gasped. "Blake, wait, please." He held up his palm, quiet, final. "This isn't a misunderstanding," he said, voice sharp but calm. "This is who you are." A whisper ran through the crowd like electricity. Phones lowered. People froze in their seats, afraid to breathe too loud. Scarlett clawed at her bodice as if yanking the truth out of lace could undo what was done. "It didn't mean anything," she stammered. "It was before Blake, before we got serious." Blake cut her off. His voice didn't rise. It didn't have to. "I was serious the moment I asked for your father's blessing." A murmur of agreement rippled from the first rows where his family sat in stiff silence. Someone coughed. A wine glass tipped. No one picked it up. Caleb took a step forward. "Blake, man, this isn't fair. You don't know the whole—" Blake turned so fast it cut the air. "I know that wasn't your bed." He didn't blink. "And I know she wasn't your wife." Caleb's jaw flexed. He opened his mouth, then shut it. The officiant slipped out the side door. A woman near the buffet whispered something to her partner, who pulled her arm and followed. The exits grew heavier with footsteps. Scarlett finally stood. Her mascara had begun to bleed into her lower lashes. She looked less like a bride, more like a woman caught playing dress-up in someone else's fantasy. "I didn't mean to ruin anything," she whispered. But no one answered. Even the florist stood still, ribbon in hand, forgetting to tie the final bouquet. Scarlett looked at Blake again. He didn't move. She turned, searching for me, but I was gone. Just a shadow at the edge of her story. And that was the last time I ever saw them in the same room. By Monday morning, the photos were everywhere. Someone had filmed the projector. Another had live-streamed the moment Scarlett dropped her bouquet. TikTok did what TikTok does. Hashtag runaway bride trended by noon. Glass chapel catastrophe hit local news before dinner. Scarlett shut down her Instagram within 48 hours. Her entire influencer life deleted. Like erasing pixels could unburn a name. Her brand deals vanished. PR agencies stopped returning emails. Blake's family confirmed the wedding was legally voided. The venue issued a formal statement. We were not aware of the content projected. We remain heartbroken for all parties involved. No one mentioned me, and I preferred it that way. Caleb's fallout took longer, but it came. Someone forwarded the photos to his pharmacy board. A quiet review began. Patients started asking questions. By the end of the month, his license was placed under ethical investigation. The clinic suspended him pending internal review. I heard he moved out of our old house. Subleased a studio near the freeway. No lawn, no mailbox, no one to pretend for. He texted me once, just a single word, why? I didn't reply. Instead, I took down the wedding photos, not in rage but because the walls deserved better. I repainted the guest room, donated the dresses Scarlett had left behind. Hung up one painting I'd bought years ago but never unboxed. It showed a woman standing in a storm dress, soaked, eyes clear. 1 week later, my old client Angela, a grief counselor, called me. I saw the video, she said carefully. I just wanted to say, I get it. You didn't explode. You dismantled. I let that word sit, dismantled. It didn't feel like destruction, it felt like clarity. I don't know where Scarlett went. Rumors said Montana, others whispered Paris. But it doesn't matter, because wherever she is, her name now carries something she can't edit away. And Caleb, he'll be fine. Men like him always find a way to survive. But me, I'm not surviving. I'm rebuilding. One boundary, one silence, one choice at a time. They tried to erase me as a wife, as a sister, as a witness. But I'm still here. And now I carry a name they'll never outrun. I live alone now. It's quieter than I expected, but not empty. The mornings are still. I make tea instead of coffee. I read paperbacks with torn covers. Sometimes I take long walks without a destination, just to prove to myself I'm no longer rushing toward people who would never catch me if I fell. The old house is gone, sold to a young couple with twin boys. They painted the mailbox blue. It suits them. I live near the mountains now, a little cabin with a wraparound porch and chipped steps. It smells like cedar and books. I teach part-time at a women's shelter downtown, facilitating small groups for survivors. Not just of violence, but of silence, of the kind of betrayal that unthreads you one tiny stitch at a time. They asked me once, what made you finally speak? I told them I didn't speak, I showed. And that's the difference. Words can be debated. Proof ends the conversation. Scarlett never reached out, no apology, no explanation. But one day I got a package. No return address, just a small box. Inside a single gold earring. The one she wore in the photo. The one that glittered above my wedding sheets. No note, no message. Just the weight of something too little, too late. I buried it beneath the oak tree in my yard. Not because I forgive her, but because I needed one thing she would never understand. Closure doesn't come from hearing sorry. It comes from choosing not to carry the wreckage forward. Some nights, I still wake up at 2:00 a.m., body remembering things my mind has stopped replaying. And sometimes I still find myself reaching for the other side of the bed. But most mornings, I stretch open the window and let the cold in. I write a lot now. Not journals, not poetry. Letters. To the version of me who sat in that hospital bed with an empty womb and still tried to believe she wasn't truly alone. To the woman who smiled through Sunday brunches while her husband stared at someone else's mouth. To the sister who tried so hard to keep the family together, she didn't notice she was the only one holding the thread. I write to her so she never forgets. You weren't crazy, you weren't too much, you weren't dramatic. You were right, and sometimes being right hurts more than anything. But it also sets you free. I don't know what love looks like next. Maybe it's quiet, maybe it's not romantic at all, maybe it's just this peace and no more pretending. That's enough. If you've ever been betrayed by someone who called you family, you know. And if you haven't, I hope you never do. But if the day ever comes when the lie is too big and the silence too loud, and you wonder if exposing the truth will make you the villain, remember this. You're not ruining anything. You're just refusing to keep carrying the burden that never belonged to you. Would you have done the same? Would you have stayed quiet? Tell me. Tell someone. Because sometimes the only way to end a nightmare is to narrate it.